I love coffee. That is the best antidote for sleep disorder. I have the privilege now to introduce you, who is my friend and a great doctor and a professor. Geraldo Ferrer is an assistant clinical professor of the psychiatry, Lake Elite College of Osteopathic Medicine, and he is the chair of the Department of Psychiatry, GME residency program at Larkin Hospital. It is my privilege and honor to invite him to give the guest lecture of this session. Please welcome Dr. Gerald.
Thank you. I want to thank Dr. Raghavan for having me here. It's a real pleasure. I'm a psychiatrist, and basically what I'm going to do today is try to envision insomnia and other sleep-related disorders through the eyes of the psychiatrist. And that way, once you get your patients that have mental illness, and whatever specialties that are coming in, you can be aware of certain cues and that can practically worsen the pathology and know when treatment is necessary immediately, when something needs to be done, or when the patient needs to be referred to a specialist. So there it is, complications and management of sleep-related disorders in patients with psychiatric disorders. Disclaimer, all I'm trying to do is to give you a better perspective of what I know for you to try to emerge and put it into your practice. No way I'm trying to, try to change your clinical judgment. It's just, for you to have an extra tool, a different perspective to help out in your treatment with your patients. Okay, so our objectives today is to understand the sleep quality in the context of advanced psychiatric management. Also, we're going to recognize particular sleep patterns and how certain pathologies, psychopathologies, have different form or pathognomonic changes, which are typical to those disorders, and how to address them promptly in order to prevent any type of relapse or worsening of the course of the illnesses. Okay, so almost all psychiatric disorders, have sleep disturbances. Okay, at one point or another, or embedded in the pathology by itself. There is a bidirectional causation. We don't know what came first. Chicken or the egg kind of thing. Why? Because it's been known that a lot of individuals who have mental illness present early with certain sleep disturbances, and then later on the pathology develops. Some of them have the pathology and start presenting with different types of sleep disturbances. And by itself, having sleep disturbances, particularly insomnia, by itself and any healthy mental individual will predispose to developing a mental disorder. We have, through the years, sleep has been studied extensively. And even though nowadays we have a lot of methods that we have used, a lot of advances, and have recognized a lot of aspects of sleep, there is still a lot unknown of what really happens through sleep, okay? And especially in this type of population, the mentally ill. But we do know enough that there is a need for direct treatment of the insomnia, irrespectively of the mental disorder, okay? Why? Because, again, that would prevent relapse and help the course of the treatment of the patient. Okay. So, overview of topics that we will cover today. We will do sleep and in patients with psychiatric disorders, how the sleep in these patients are. There's sometimes pathognomonic changes to some pathologies and other changes that are just associated in others. The risk of, that we'll have from the psychiatric patient due to sleep disturbances, and the impact that sleep disturbances have in the course and treatment of the condition, and the effects of psychotropic medications on sleep, how we can use them and what we have available, and the impact of sleep deprivation on mental health. Okay, so basically, in the past, we, started studying sleep. We thought that, it was just a passive process. Okay, at one point we even thought that, putting a patient not to sleep can, help in certain disorders. And, that was until 1953 when we discovered non-REM and REM sleep. At that point, we had better methods to study sleep, like graphic methods and EEGs. And from there on, we started studying the sleep cycle. And we learned very much that sleep is a very, very active process, per se. It's fundamental to brain function and a central role for mental health. Why? Because when we sleep and we have a regular cycle, basically, what it does is, in the brain, it helps with our cognitive process. It helps with our emotions because it helps consolidate what we learned through the day. We'll see later on that sometimes when we don't have a regular cycle through the night, certain pathologies tend to, for the individual to consolidate negative memories that can happen also with some medication. At the same time, the healing process through stressors that went through the day are not able to be processed, and then we'll continue on with an emotional state, more anxiety, more level, and reacted to certain situations as we don't have a clear mind to function, and at the same time not able to process. In the same way, somewhat like somebody's learning to play an organ. Sometimes you're playing a guitar and you're having a hard time, knowing how to put your fingers on it, and you end up frustrated. You go to sleep, and for some reason you wake up the next morning and bam, you pick up the guitar and you start playing the notes. Why? Because those memories of what you were trying to do got consolidated, and it helps your body and your brain to be able to execute certain things. Okay, and it's sort of something, an anecdote that way. And also that helps with management of interpersonal conflicts with other individuals and yourself, to be able, to be stable as a person. Also personality disorders get affected with these things. Okay, well, it's a little funny little thing there. Insomnia is very common. Trying to sleep alright, but it's a very important thing. 30 to 60% of people with mental disorders come to your office and complain of insomnia. Here's a diagram that better shows that. What it's trying to show there is that individuals that come to the office, whether it's a psychiatrist, especially the primary care physician, and they have some type of sleep disturbance factors or pathologies per se. The main one, okay, precipitating insomnia is mental disorder. About 30 to 40% of all the others, like movement, breathing disorders, the mentally ill patient will be the main one, the largest group who will be complaining of insomnia, about 1/3 of that particular patient population. Now we're going to start with the first topic, which is sleep in patients with psychiatric disorders. Here I want to mention several of the most common and also the most debilitating mental illnesses and how sleep relates to these disorders. Let's start off with major depressive disorder. In major depressive disorder, the patient will complain, insomnia or hypersomnia. Being that said, is one of the diagnostic criteria, sleep disturbances. Practically, I'll go over a little bit more on the other slide of this, but there is pathognomonic changes seen in the sleep cycle of a patient with major depressive disorder. It has been identified. It can be identified as a prodrome, before the patient develops the disorder, before the patient is exacerbated into the disorder, has already suffered from major depression. And, you see things like taking a long time to fall asleep, increased sleep latency. You'll see fragmented sleep, increased wakefulness throughout the night. That's what it means. And nightmares, they might complain about nightmares as well, so on, which that, due to that disturbance in the cycle, sleep will not be efficient. Therefore, the patient is sleepy the next day, and it's a constant cycle where emotions cannot be controlled and basically worsening the symptoms. About 80%, 90% of adults and 90% of a child with MDD experience sleep disturbances. So, more than 80%. It's a very high rate. Being that said, sometimes you have a patient, there's been a lot of studies that a patient is not given an antidepressant per se, and you put the patient to sleep, with a hypnotic or whatever not, and as the patient starts to sleep somewhat, that sleep cycle starts to catch up and regulate somewhat, and the depressive symptoms improve just with sleeping by itself. Which is a mode of treatment that, we use, okay? And I'll explain why, because basically if a patient is not treated for the insomnia and only for the depression, what happens? You treat the depression and the patient stays with residual insomnia symptoms. What happens after that? We have noticed it throughout a lot of studies that later on the patient has a much higher rate, about 40-50% of having a relapse. Okay? Just because the insomnia is there, persistent after that. So the goal is to, give an antidepressant to the patient, cognitive therapy, of course, and all the things that we do. But at the same time, it is very important to put the patient to sleep. Okay? At least in the short term, as the depression starts to resolve. Okay? Why? Because there's changes in their sleep cycle. For example, they're going to have a reduced total sleep time. The latency for sleep is going to increase, so this patient take a long time in bed to fall asleep. Once they fall asleep, they have a reduced rate latency, so they go automatically, practically, into REM. Okay? What that's saying is that, for example, the first half of the night, the patient spends more time, and a regular person spends most of his time on slow wave sleep, okay, non-REM sleep, okay? And as the night progresses, okay, as the night progresses, that gets a bit shorter, and REM starts to increase. The period of REM increases. Okay, so REM is shorter and then it starts to increase. It takes about an hour and a half for a normal individual, 9 minutes to hit the first REM and so on throughout the night. And then REM periods start to become longer and the deep sleep start to get shorter. In a depressed individual, they're going to spend more time in REM, but they're going to spend more time in REM in that first period, half of the night. Why? Because they have, total amount of time is decreased. of sleep, sleep about 5 hours, morning awakenings, and at the same time they're taking long to go to sleep. Okay? That's even becomes shorter. Being said, they also have frequent awakenings, fragmentations of sleep, and not having a normal cycle. So they're spending more time in REM, even though, it's going to be less REM periods throughout the night. They do spend more at the beginning. In fact, the first period of the night, when they go straight into REM, practically, it's a bit longer than the diagram doesn't show it that well, but it's longer than on a regular individual. And psychotropic medications like antidepressants, especially SSRIs, tend to shorten REM. So that's already contributing to the treatment, not just the depressive symptoms itself. Putting the patient to sleep then helps that cycle to try to catch up and try to resolve the episode. Okay? Decrease sleep efficiency at the end, which is what's going to happen, right? Okay, so let's talk about the bipolar disorder patient. The bipolar disorder patient basically has a lot of this pattern of mind changes similar to a major depressive disorder individual. For a manic episode, one of the criteria is decreasing for sleep. About 69 to 99% of the patients report difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep, and that's independent of just the manic episode. That's the patient per se in an unstable state. Some report hypersomnia. That's if they're in a depressive episode. Sometimes it's sort of a prodrome, cueing that the patient can be about to compensate and become depressed. And the same goes when the patient is complaining of insomnia. Their insomnia is severe, worse the course of illness, and where it says most common prodrome of a manic episode, it's something that I want to make you aware of. Why? If a patient comes to your office, it's your bipolar patient, doesn't have an appointment to see their psychiatrist in several weeks, and for some reason, you have, it's your patient, you have a very good rapport with them, and the patient comes and says, doc, I've been having difficulty sleeping for a few nights now. That's like an emergency stakeholder, fast. Get to the bottom of it, try to see what's happening, put something on board if they cannot get to the psychiatrist, so try to read the psychiatrist, because that's a biomarker for relapse. That's been studied, and it's a biomarker for relapse. Once they have a period of sleeping very well, they start saying, doc, for somebody, even though you don't see them manic yet, or even apomanic, and they're talking to you normal, and they say, it's been a couple of nights that I haven't slept well. That's what's going to happen if it's not addressed. Okay? And you'll see me saying these things throughout the presentation, and the reason is because there's a lot of biases with psychotropic, with sedatives and medications used for insomnia and whatnot. And I want to make a point here, we'll get to the end, where sometimes these are very important to use. Okay, the circadian system model. This is a great model. This is something that I use myself in my practice with my patients. It's not, it's a tool. It's a tool for us to use, a great tool. We need to use medications along with this, but it's sort of like we're talking about, you're depressed or you have an adjustment disorder or whatnot, and we refer to a psychotherapist and they do their part and we use the medication. In this, I've had very good results when a patient sticks to this type of model. It is very hard for them to stick to this type of model because, there are individuals who per se are prone to engaging behaviors that cause, a lot of pressure, inappropriate behavior, things like staying up at night, going out, not eating right, and that it's very hard for them to do. But when they stick to it and they have a lot of support, family members that help them stick to it, they basically do very well with medication treatment. Right? And basically, what this says is that we have studied that individuals with bipolar disorder have a disrupted or suboptimal circadian rhythm. Okay, their internal clock is not calibrated the way that regular individuals have. Okay, so if you get these individuals and you tell them, listen, I don't want you to go to sleep past 10:30. You will not wake up at 11, wake up 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. Okay? I want you to eat at regular hours. I don't want you eating late at night. Do exercise early in the day or early in the evening, not late in the evening. Now, all these things that would make us at any point or not, a little bit of insomnia or anxiety or not, with them is detrimental. Just a little thing will throw them off. And if they maintain this cycle, basically, they will do well. Okay? And it's also used as a biomarker when these things are not being done the way they should. I have a patient, he likes to drink coffee, and I keep telling him, not past 11 or 1, I need the 1. And every time he comes back, I guess he compensates because he likes to smoke late at night and drink coffee. Throws him off immediately. Let me see if here. Okay. Here we, in the circadian model, has been studied many genes. These are some of many that are being studied in relation to the circadian rhythm. We have the clock gene, timeless gene, the RNT2, and the DBP gene. Particularly in mice, they have studied the clock gene, which is the deletion of exon 19. And what is shown is that when this gene is altered, these mice engage in maniacal behaviors, high reward seeking behaviors, sleep, they're they're a bipolar patient, for real. All the things that studies like certain proteins, gene products, which this one, red alpha protein, it's in relation with keeping that homeostatic regulation of the circadian rhythm. And it contributes with regulation per se. When it's disrupted, lacking, it causes a lot of disturbances due to the fact that it's not regulated well. That's the problem reason for you to regulate your mood symptomatology. And interestingly enough, the best medication used for bipolar disorder, which is lithium. Okay, we have tons of medications. Some people cannot tolerate lithium. It has a lot of side effect profile in the long term, but it's by far the best medication to treat bipolar disorder. It has been shown that it correlates with normalizing that circadian rhythm. Now let's go into anxiety. Everybody suffers from anxiety, right? And we see a lot of patients coming to your office complaining of anxiety. Sometimes, unless it's something really disturbing per se, the generalized anxiety disorder that, or social anxiety disorder, panic disorder gets to level 4, which already go, let's go to the psychiatrist because this individual's not even in your house. You have a lot of patients coming and complaining of anxiety. Okay. And we have found some changes in the sleep of these individuals, and they'll complain of it. They'll give you the symptoms. But, in contrast with the last two pathologies we were talking about, these are not, this is associated. There's not a pathognomonic per se seen, in a sleep cycle study. But you will see that the person takes long to fall asleep, and above all, having frequent awakenings throughout the night, okay? And like always, of course, the time spent in actual sleep is going to be less, even though sometimes this individual spends more time in bed, but the quantity of sleep is decreased. Like I said, there are no alterations into it. But we see decreased percentage of of the night spent in slow wave sleep with this deep sleep, and increased percentage of the night stage 1 compared to controls. What does that say? The patient is like a patient that's using a benzodiazepine. Spends the majority of the first time of the night on stage 2. See? And 1. Because it's jumping back to an arousable state, getting awake again. So what happens? They're not getting restorative sleep, and they're not getting through having a proper REM. I mean, even though if we cannot show it, we can speculate that that's what's happening. Post-traumatic stress disorder, big time. We see this on practically any individual that has a trauma, witness a trauma, especially, with a loved one, even a loved one who have witnessed a trauma speaks to frequently to their son or daughter constantly about the trauma they suffered in the war. It can even precipitate this disease, okay? Not necessarily we can see an individual that comes to the office and says, hey, I just came back from Afghanistan. It could be somebody that got assaulted, whatever, okay? They basically complain mostly of distressing dreams and difficulty falling asleep. Like over the silent disorder, they're going to have a lot of fragmented sleep, a lot of arousal during the night. And one thing particular to that we have studied is the WASL, wake after sleep onset. This is important then because two things. You can measure directly using this method how much really wait time was there after the patient falling asleep. Okay? How many fragmentations of sleep going back to stage 1 the patient had. This is important for PTSD because we have noticed that the patient that has PTSD, the more they have, the higher the WASL, the more severe and more frequent are the nightmares. Okay? The more they fragment and spend, not on sleep time, once they go back to sleep, it's when the nightmares are going to be very vivid, severe and distressing. And they're going to last longer. We don't have specifics like the other diseases of seeing it, on a scale, but it can be telling us that these individuals are practically sort of like an MVD going straight into REM and it's lasting long, trying to catch up, particularly probably by the end of the night. And they're going to have increased REM density, sort of like also like major depressive disorder, which is that the frequency of the REM, rapid eye movement during the REM sleep are going to be higher, are going to be faster. That's telling you this individual, even though we need to, hormones are active in REM, and we need this for restorative sleep, okay? It's super overactive and dysregulating, and most likely a lot of hormones that have to do with stress are being more active than the ones that don't. So memory consolidation gets impaired as well, and negative memories get consolidated, and it's a vicious cycle. The big one, schizophrenia. Okay. When you have your schizophrenic patient, be aware, because the prevalence of sleep disorder, especially insomnia, is 80% or higher, and it's very severe. But what happens? The schizophrenic is like a dementia propostage, that's what it used to be called. The executive function is poor. Sometimes you're asking a question, and a lot of what we do as psychiatrists is through the years before you're just trying to learn how to speak to these individuals, how to engage with them, how to get information from them, because it's difficult. And it's not because they're angry and paranoid, that can happen, very angry, try to attack you, paranoid. But most of the time it happens because these individuals have such a poor executive functioning that it becomes hard for them to disclose what they're feeling, right? So they seldom, complain of these symptoms. Because you start talking to them, how you doing? And we're looking at the psychosis, we're worried about the psychosis, we're worried about this individual hurting someone else, or being able to function and stay in your assisted living facility, or behaving well with the parents, that we sometimes miss asking, even around us sometimes, the psychiatrist, are you sleeping well? Sometimes psychiatrists even become so challenging, they tell you, maybe they tell you, we're not sleeping well. We're like, okay, what else are we going to do? Look how much antipsychotics, look how much sedatives they have. What are we going to do? So it's, that's normal baseline. Well, is it? The truth is that, they have a lot of sleeplessness. And that's being at baseline. These individuals have a problem sleeping. They are like a delirium patient. Their sleep cycle is turned upside down. They tend to want to sleep during the day and not during the night. That becomes challenges also for caregivers, okay? And again, at the same time, distort them, because our human brains are made to sleep during the night and not during the day. That predisposes when they're not sleeping to exacerbations, okay? And at the same time, the other pathologies, it precedes relapse and decompensation. So again, if they call me, a bipolar patient, and tell you, I'm not sleeping well, sometimes we say, oh, no, that patient's just saying, try to look into it because that will lead to an exacerbation of their illnesses, okay? Worsening the course of their illnesses, worsening the course of maintaining a baseline. And these are the type of individuals that you want, and also bipolar, but you will want to consider long-term or indefinite treatment with a sedative or hypnotic for sleep. Okay, so this is a nice diagram because you see how totally different in comparison to normal subjects and the major depressive individual, how distorted the sleep is on a patient with schizophrenia. Okay, so for example, you have the WASL that we were talking before. It's increasing major depression, but look at the, it's not working, sorry. Look at where it says WASL, look at how high, there it is. Okay, so look how high on a schizophrenic patient is, somewhat high on a major depressive patient, and look how it is on a regular patient, it's low, okay? That latency of REM on a patient with schizophrenia is going to be high. So, basically you're going to take long to go into REM, normal on a regular patient. And like we discussed before, on a depressed patient, it's going to be low because they're going to go right into REM. Slow wave sleep, it's going to be high on a patient with depression and very low with that. So, what we're saying, the whole cycle, there's no real compensation there from one thing to the other. It's going all over the place. Okay? Like right here, we spend a lot of time on REM, like a PTSD patient, they're in stage 2 there, and look how low we're in depression, and vice versa here in REM 1 sleep, very low time to hit the first one. This index here, basically what it says is this is a ratio between the REM 1 and non-REM sleep, okay? And it can give you certain things. Basically, what it says is that the index of endogenous periodicity has been shown on some studies that basically an individual who has a low, and we show means that their REM is they're going to be spending very little time in REM, and that tells you this patient is about to have an acute exacerbation, okay, versus a ratio being high, it's more on the slow wave sleep. And I'll show you a little relevance in the next slide. Okay, so, these are changes that we're going to see. The patients having positive symptoms, so it's shorter REM latency, longer sleep onset, here, more prominent negative symptoms, you're going to see shorter REM onset latency, go straight into REM. But this is very important because a lot of people are studying this. Why? Because when a lot of the time of the night on a schizophrenic patient is being spent on REM for some particular reason, like I said, it can change throughout how the pathology is presenting. Acute exacerbation, continuous schizophrenia disorder. The more time and the greater REM density, right, it's a biomarker for suicidal ideations in these individuals. They have a greater percentage of possibly committing suicide. And people are trying to look for these, for schizophrenics who are not the population that more frequently commit suicide, but when they attempt it, a lot of times they succeed. And that's why it's admirable to look at these things. Psychosis, well, we're trying to say here is any pathology that involves having a psychotic episode.